By the early 1980s, Marvin Gaye was already a music legend. But behind the image of the soul icon, his personal life was collapsing. He was deeply depressed, drowning in debt, paranoid, and struggling with serious health issues. Exhausted by the music industry, he withdrew from the spotlight and eventually moved back into his parents' house in Los Angeles, a decision that would turn out to be fatal. Marvin's relationship with his father had always been volatile. Marvin Gaye Sr. was a deeply religious, authoritarian man who despised his son's lifestyle and career. Their relationship was marked by constant arguments, emotional abuse, and years of unresolved resentment. The house was tense, hostile, and emotionally unstable. On April 1, 1984, everything exploded. An argument broke out between Marvin's parents, as it often did. Marvin intervened, trying to defend his mother. The situation escalated quickly. Voices were raised, insults were exchanged. Marvin confronted his father aggressively, pushing him emotionally to the edge. Marvin Gaye Sr. left the room and came back with a .38 caliber revolver. The gun had been given to him months earlier by Marvin himself, meant for protection. Without warning, he fired. The first bullet struck Marvin in the chest. The second hit his shoulder. Marvin collapsed on the floor of his childhood bedroom, critically wounded. Emergency services arrived quickly, but the injuries were too severe. Marvin Gaye was pronounced dead the next day. He was 45 years old. He had celebrated his birthday just one day earlier. What followed shocked the public almost as much as the killing itself. Marvin Gaye Sr. pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, but never served prison time. Due to his age and health, he received a suspended sentence. He would die years later, having never publicly expressed true remorse. In the summer of 1969, Sharon Tate was one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars. At just 26 years old, she had already appeared in several successful films and was married to director Roman Polanski. She was 8 months pregnant and living in a rented house in Los Angeles, while Polanski was working overseas. On the night of August 8, 1969, Tate stayed home with friends. Inside the house were celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, her boyfriend Wojciech Frykowski, and later that evening Stephen Parent, who was visiting the property's caretaker. Shortly after midnight, 4 members of the Manson family arrived at the house. They were acting under orders from Charles Manson, who'd instructed them to kill everyone inside. None of the victims had any connection to Manson. They were chosen purely because of the location. The attackers entered the property quietly and began the assault. Stephen Parent was shot in his car as he was leaving. Inside the house, the others were tied up, terrorized, and murdered one by one. Sharon Tate begged for her life and the life of her unborn child. Her pleas were ignored. By the end of the attack, 5 people were dead. Sharon Tate was stabbed multiple times and died before help could arrive. Her unborn son did not survive. The brutality of the murders shocked the nation. When police arrived the next morning, the crime scene was unlike anything Los Angeles had seen. The word pig were written in blood on the front door. The killings instantly became one of the most infamous crimes in American history. The Manson family was arrested months later after a separate investigation led police to their desert compound. Charles Manson and his followers were put on trial in 1970 in a case that became a media spectacle. All were found guilty and sentenced to death, sentences that were later commuted to life in prison. Sharon Tate's death marked the violent end of Hollywood's innocence. She was not killed because of fame, rivalry, or scandal, but because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. By the mid-1960s, Jayne Mansfield was one of the most recognizable Hollywood stars in the world. She was an actress, a model, and a pop culture icon, often compared to Marilyn Monroe. Despite her fame beginning to fade, her name was still instantly recognizable. In the early hours of June 29, 1967, Mansfield was traveling by car through Louisiana. She was riding in the back seat of a 1966 Buick Electra with her partner Sam Brody and 3 of her children. They were returning from a nightclub appearance in Mississippi and heading toward New Orleans. It was just after 2 a.m. when the car approached a slow-moving tractor trailer on Highway 90. The truck was spraying mosquito fog, creating a thick cloud that severely reduced visibility. The driver of Mansfield's car failed to see the truck in time and slammed into the rear of the trailer at high speed. The impact was catastrophic. The top of the car was crushed and partially sheared off by the trailer. Jayne Mansfield, sitting in the back seat, was killed instantly. She was only 34 years old. At the scene, rumors spread almost immediately that Mansfield had been decapitated. In reality, her head was not severed, but the severe head trauma and the loss of her wig created that impression for first responders and the press. The graphic nature of the crash fueled decades of myths surrounding her death. Miraculously, her 3 children survived the accident. One of them was her 5-year-old daughter, Mariska Hargitay, who would later become a famous actress herself. She was asleep in the back seat and suffered only minor injuries. Jayne Mansfield's death shocked Hollywood and the public. The accident led to a major change in road safety regulations in the United States. Following the crash, the federal government mandated the installation of rear underride guards on tractor trailers, now commonly known as Mansfield bars, designed to prevent cars from sliding underneath trucks in collisions. Her death was sudden, violent, and completely unexpected. A glamorous Hollywood icon, killed not by scandal or illness, but by a single moment on a dark highway that changed automotive safety forever. Adrienne Shelly was best known as an actress and filmmaker, celebrated for her warmth, intelligence, and creative voice. She gained recognition in the late 1980s with independent films and later reinvented herself as a director and writer, working on deeply personal projects. On November 1, 2006, Shelly was working alone in her office apartment in Manhattan. She was in the final stages of post-production on her film Waitress, a project she had written and directed herself. The movie was expected to be her major breakthrough. That afternoon, Shelly was found dead in her apartment by her husband. She was discovered hanging from a bedsheet tied around her neck. At first, police believed it was a suicide. There were no immediate signs of forced entry, and the scene appeared straightforward. But the story quickly began to fall apart. Investigators noticed inconsistencies in the apartment. There were signs of a struggle, and the position of Shelly's body raised questions. As detectives continued their work, they discovered evidence that someone else had been in the apartment that day. The truth emerged days later. A 19-year-old construction worker named Diego Pilco had been working in the building. He entered Shelly's apartment to complain about noise she had made earlier. An argument broke out. During the confrontation, Shelly was pushed and fell. Panicking and believing he had seriously injured her, Pilco staged the scene to look like a suicide and fled. He later confessed. Adrienne Shelly was 40 years old when she died. The revelation was devastating. What initially appeared to be a tragic personal decision was, in reality, a senseless and accidental killing followed by a desperate cover-up. Her death became a chilling reminder of how quickly violence can erupt in ordinary situations. Just months after her death, Waitress premiered to critical acclaim. The film became a success and cemented Shelly's legacy as a talented filmmaker whose life and career were cut short just as she was finding her voice. James Dean was the embodiment of youthful rebellion. In the early 50s, he became a cultural icon almost overnight, starring in films that defined a generation. Rebel Without a Cause had just been released, and Dean was on the brink of becoming the biggest star in Hollywood. On September 30th, 1955, James Dean was driving his brand new Porsche 550 Spyder through California. He was heading towards Salinas to participate in a weekend race event. Dean loved speed. He had recently been warned by police for speeding and was already known for pushing limits, both on and off screen. That afternoon at approximately 5:45 p.m., Dean was driving east on Route 466 near Sholom. As he approached an intersection, a Ford Tudor driven by a 23-year-old student named Donald Turnipseed made a left turn directly into Dean's path. Dean attempted to swerve, but there was no time. The Porsche slammed into the side of the Ford at high speed. James Dean was killed almost instantly. He suffered massive head and neck injuries from the impact. His passenger survived with serious injuries, while the other driver walked away. Dean was just 24 years old. The shock was immediate and global. Rebel Without a Cause had not even reached its full theatrical run. 2 more films, East of Eden and Giant would be released after his death, cementing his legend. James Dean became the ultimate symbol of unrealized potential. His death transformed him from a rising actor into an eternal icon, frozen in time as Hollywood's most famous what if. River Phoenix was one of the most gifted actors of his generation. By his early 20s, he had already delivered powerful performances and was widely considered the future of Hollywood. He was thoughtful, intense, and deeply respected by his peers. On the night of October 30th, 1993, River Phoenix was in Los Angeles planning to attend a Halloween party. Before the night was over, he stopped at the Viper Room, a popular nightclub co-owned by Johnny Depp, where his brother Joaquin was scheduled to perform. Shortly after arriving outside the club, Phoenix began to feel unwell. Around 1 a.m., he collapsed on the sidewalk in front of the venue. Witnesses described him convulsing violently as his siblings desperately tried to help. Joaquin Phoenix called 911, while River continued to seize on the pavement in full view of onlookers. Paramedics arrived quickly and transported him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but it was too late. River Phoenix was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. He was 23 years old. A toxicology report later revealed that Phoenix had ingested a lethal combination of drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and Valium. The mixture caused sudden heart failure and respiratory collapse. His death sent shockwaves through Hollywood. River Phoenix had been outspoken against drug abuse and had carefully cultivated an image of integrity and sensitivity. The contrast between his public persona and the circumstances of his death made the tragedy even more disturbing. River Phoenix's passing marked the loss of one of cinema's brightest talents, taken at the exact moment when his career was reaching new heights. Heath Ledger was at the peak of his career. By late 2007, he had just completed filming The Dark Knight, a performance that would later be regarded as one of the most transformative roles in cinema history. Few people knew that behind the scenes, Ledger was struggling badly with exhaustion and insomnia. On January 22, 2008, Ledger was staying in a rented apartment in Manhattan's Soho neighborhood. He had been dealing with severe sleep problems for months and was prescribed multiple medications to manage anxiety, pain, and insomnia. Friends later said he was barely sleeping and pushing himself relentlessly. That afternoon, Ledger was found unresponsive in his bedroom by his housekeeper. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics attempted resuscitation, but Heath Ledger was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 28 years old. The medical examiner later determined that Ledger died from acute intoxication caused by a combination of prescription medications. The drugs included powerful painkillers, anti-anxiety medication, and sleeping pills. None were illegal on their own, but together they created a fatal suppression of his respiratory system. There was no suicide note. Authorities ruled the death accidental. The news stunned the world. Just months later, The Dark Knight was released, and Ledger's portrayal of the Joker became legendary. He would posthumously win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, becoming only the second actor in history to receive an Oscar after death. Heath Ledger's death became a tragic reminder of how easily prescription medications can turn lethal, even for someone young, talented, and seemingly unstoppable. Anton Yelchin was quietly becoming one of Hollywood's most promising actors. Best known for playing Pavel Chekhov in the Star Trek reboot films, he had already built a reputation for thoughtful, emotionally grounded performances well beyond blockbuster roles. In the early hours of June 19, 2016, Yelchin returned to his home in Studio City, Los Angeles, after spending time with friends. He drove a 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee up his steep driveway and exited the vehicle. What he did not realize was that his SUV had not fully shifted into park. The vehicle began rolling backward down the incline. Yelchin was standing between the car and a brick mailbox pillar when the Jeep pinned him against the structure. He was trapped, unable to move or call for help. Friends arrived several hours later and discovered him still pinned between the vehicle and the gate. Emergency responders were called immediately, but Anton Yelchin was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 27 years old. The official cause of death was traumatic asphyxia, caused by the crushing pressure of the vehicle against his chest. Investigators later revealed that Yelchin's Jeep model was part of a massive recall. The electronic gear shifter design was known to be confusing, and numerous rollaway incidents had already been reported. Yelchin had received recall notices but had not yet scheduled the repair. His parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Fiat Chrysler, which was settled privately in 2018. Bruce Lee was one of the most physically disciplined and admired figures in modern history. By the summer of 1973, he was in Hong Kong preparing for his next film, Game of Death, while enjoying unprecedented global fame. At just 32 years old, he appeared to be in perfect health. On July 20th, 1973, Lee was at the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei to discuss the film. During the afternoon, he complained of a headache. He was given a prescription painkiller that contained aspirin and a mild tranquilizer. Lee took the pill and lay down to rest. Hours later, when it was time to leave for dinner, Lee could not be awakened. Attempts to revive him failed. His personal doctor was called, followed by an ambulance. Bruce Lee was rushed to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. An autopsy revealed severe cerebral edema. His brain had swollen significantly, causing fatal pressure inside the skull. The official cause of death was ruled as an allergic reaction to the medication, classified as death by misadventure. Almost immediately, speculation exploded. Conspiracy theories ranged from secret assassinations to mysterious family curses, especially after the later death of his son Brandon Lee. Decades later, alternative medical theories emerged, including heat stroke or water intoxication, but none replaced the official ruling. Bruce Lee's death shocked the world precisely because it contradicted his image. The man who redefined human physical potential died not from violence or combat, but from a reaction to a common medication. By the early 1980s, Vic Morrow was a respected actor known for intense, commanding performances. In July 1982, he was filming a segment for Twilight Zone, the movie, a high-budget anthology film with ambitious practical effects. On the night of July 23, 1982, Morrow was shooting a Vietnam War scene at Indian Dunes in California. The scene involved explosions, gunfire, and a helicopter hovering low over shallow water. Morrow was carrying two child actors, 7-year-old Micah Din Lei and 6-year-old Renee Shin Yi Chen, while running through the scene. Despite the dangerous setup, filming proceeded in the early morning hours. During one take, pyrotechnic explosions detonated too close to the helicopter. The blast destabilized the aircraft. Within seconds, the helicopter lost control and crashed directly on top of the actors below. The main rotor blade struck Vic Morrow and one of the children, killing them instantly. The second child was crushed beneath the helicopter. All three died at the scene. The accident was partially captured on film. Investigations revealed multiple safety violations. The children had been illegally hired to work at night. Explosions were placed closer than safety guidelines allowed. Warnings from crew members had been ignored. The incident became one of the most infamous tragedies in film history. Director John Landis and several crew members were charged with involuntary manslaughter. After a long trial, all were acquitted, though civil settlements were later reached with the families. The deaths of Vic Morrow and the two children permanently changed Hollywood safety regulations. Stricter rules for stunts, helicopters, explosives, and child actors were introduced as a direct result of the tragedy. It remains one of the most horrifying examples of how ambition, pressure, and negligence can converge with irreversible consequences. These were some of the most shocking and tragic celebrity deaths ever recorded. Sudden accidents, violence, and moments no one saw coming. Which one affected you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, like it, boost it, and subscribe for more dark stories. See you soon. Bye.